She was called Isidora of Rouen, a woman whose beauty was said to silence men and stir envy in queens. Her skin like carved ivory, her eyes storm-touched blue. Some believed she was touched by angels. Others whispered of a darker patron. In the spring of 1329, in a quiet hamlet north of Rouen, France, Isidora appeared. Her husband, a merchant, had died on pilgrimage. She had lived alone ever since. But on that morning, she was pregnant. No man had been seen coming or going. No romance, no vows, no scandal. Just the growing curve of her womb and silence. The village buzzed with suspicion. Was it a sin? A secret? Or something worse? Midwives whispered of strange things. They said her eyes glowed faintly in candlelight, that dogs refused to walk near her, that the yew trees outside her home had stopped blooming. And at night, the forest made no sound. By the 7th month, her stomach was swollen far beyond nature. She could no longer fit through her own doorway. The village physician, Father Moreau, was called. He entered her home before dusk. He left an hour later, pale, trembling, lips sealed. 3 weeks later, Father Moreau was found drowned in the village well. He had wrapped his rosary so tightly around his wrist, it cut the skin. He never spoke of what he saw. When her labor began, the sky turned black. A thunderstorm rolled over the hills like a tidal wave. Birds vanished. Ice crystals formed on the summer grass. 3 midwives entered the house. Only one came back. Sister Estelle was found walking barefoot into the trees, her dress soaked with blood. She whispered, "It looked at me. It has no eyes." But it looked at me. She never spoke again. The cottage was sealed. The air grew still. Some claimed they heard screams inside. Others swore they saw something crawling on the thatched roof, but no one dared to go closer. For 2 days, there was silence. On the 3rd, Father Eloin, young, devout, brave, approached the cottage alone, holy water in one hand, a torch in the other. What he found inside was never written in any church ledger, and that is where we begin. Father Eloin had faced heretics. He had prayed over plague pits, but what he found inside Isidora's home would haunt him long after his final breath. The room was cold, the air wet with rot. The hearth had gone dark, yet the walls glistened, like something had passed through them. A shattered cradle lay in the corner. Beside it, a wet smear dragged toward the shadows beneath the bed. And then he heard it, breathing, shallow, raspy, but not human. Something that breathed without lungs. Behind the curtain, Isidora stood, alive, her body unmoving, her hands limp at her sides, but her eyes, wide, unblinking, were filled with something between awe and terror. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Only a sound, a low, gurgling coo. Not from her lips, from behind her. It wasn't a child, not in the way we understand. It had no face, no eyes, no mouth, just folds of skin, wet and raw, arms too long for its body, fingers tipped with bone, and it clung to her like it had grown there, like it had never truly left the womb. The priest spoke the only words he knew, Latin prayers, his voice trembling. The thing turned toward him. It had no eyes, but it knew he was there, and it reached for him. He ran. The torch fell. The flames took hold. Isidora didn't move. She watched the fire as if it were mercy. Behind her, the creature curled into her back, as if returning to the womb it never should have left. By dawn, the house was ash. Father Eloin was found collapsed in the church, fevered, rambling, his hands burned. He repeated the same phrase again and again. It was not born. It was made. The church acted swiftly. The ruins were blessed, sealed, and buried. A decree was sent to the archdiocese. Destroy all records of Isidora of Rouen. But not every record was erased. One monk, Brother Alric, preserved fragments, in margins, in ink, between lines of hymns. He wrote, "The child bore no name. It fed not from her breast, but her breath. And she let it, as though she had no will left." He never called it evil, only unnatural. He believed it was not born of sin. But sorrow, a creature shaped not by lust but by grief, loneliness, and something else. Centuries passed. The story faded into folklore, a cautionary tale, a ghost story, a myth whispered in Normandy during winter storms. But fragments remain, buried in archives, hushed in abbeys, feared in forests, and even now some claim to have seen it. A pale figure in the yew woods near Rouen, clinging to trees, listening. Today only stones remain, the cottage burned, the records erased. But in Rouen, no children play near the yew grove. Locals still speak the name Isadora in hushed tones. Not as a mother, but as something else entirely. For centuries, the church whispered of her in secret. A woman who was never touched, yet gave birth. A mother whose child was not baptized and could not die. They feared her. Not because she sinned, but because she broke the rules of nature. In hidden archives, scholars found mentions of others like her. Women who bore children with no features. Infants who lived only in shadows. Creatures that mimicked life, but were not truly alive. They were called Mater Obscura, mothers of darkness. These tales repeat across Europe, scattered, denied, suppressed. Every time, a woman. Alone. Every time, a child that wasn't human. Every time, fire. A forbidden manuscript, discovered in a Jesuit archive, described them in chilling detail. They are not born. They are pulled through, shaped by silence, molded by grief. Shadows wearing the skin of innocence. Not evil, not demonic, just wrong. Born of loneliness, of unspoken sorrow, of hearts broken too long and minds frayed too far. The medieval world had no language for depression, no science for hallucinations, no comfort for widows grieving in silence. So when grief took form, it became a monster. Today we might see it differently, as trauma, as mental collapse. But back then, they saw something they couldn't understand. And what people cannot understand, they burn. Isadora had loved. She had lost. Perhaps she created something in her grief. Or perhaps something answered it. It was a child born from her sorrow. Some say they still see her, a pale figure watching from between the yews, a hum in the wind, like a lullaby with no words. They say if you listen too closely, you'll feel a hand touch your shoulder, soft and cold, not cruel, not hateful, just lonely. History buried her, the church erased her. But in the places where grief echoes and silence lingers too long, she waits. Isadora's story wasn't just a tale of one woman. It was a reflection of something far deeper and far older. In a world where women were meant to be silent, obedient, and pure, what happened when they broke? Not in rebellion, but in sorrow. The Middle Ages were full of monsters, but most were not real. They were symbols, warnings, manifestations of what people feared but couldn't name: desire, madness, suffering, grief, and more than anything, a woman out of place. Isadora's tale became a fable of fear, not of evil, but of absence. The absence of care, of voice, of healing. Left alone too long, even love can twist into something unrecognizable. They didn't have the words for it then. No diagnosis, no trauma studies, no therapy. A woman crying too long was called possessed. A mother mourning too long was called a witch. A child born too strange was called a demon. But this fear goes even deeper. Across ancient cultures, from Mesopotamia to Greece, stories echoed of women who lost children and became something else. The Lamia, the Jello, the mourning mother turned monster, always female, always grieving, always punished. So many stories, too similar to ignore, too scattered to trace. Perhaps Isadora was just one of many. Perhaps these were not separate tales, but pieces of one forgotten truth. Today, we might call it something else: postpartum psychosis, delusional grief, traumatic projection. But the terror still feels the same. We still fear what grief can create, and we still don't speak of it. How sorrow distorts the mind, how silence feeds monsters, We fear the thing Isadora became. But what we truly fear is becoming her. So if you walk the edge of the Rouen woods and you hear a soft breath behind you, don't run. It might not be a monster. It might just be grief, wearing the face of something lost.